The history of the Warhammer world stretches over millennia and is littered with the detritus of 100,000 battles. The bones of the dead lie scattered in shallow graves, each holding a tale of suffering and woe. Yet for all the forgotten stories of fallen warriors, some events, those that shaped the world most profoundly, are well remembered. Minus 15,000. The time of creation begins with the arrival of the Old Ones. The time of dragons comes to an end. Minus 15,000 to minus 5v600. The servants of the Old Ones, the Slann, settle in Lustria and undertake many great works. The land masses are shifted, creating new continents and oceans. The geomantic web is constructed, allowing magic to flow around the world, stabilizing the new lands and fueling great and arcane machineries. The world itself is moved through the void, bringing it closer to its distant sun, warming its surface and making it more habitable for new races, enabling the Old Ones to raise them from barbarism and learn the ways of civilization. Minus 5700. Having mastered magic, the celestial dragon learns to take human form and rises to rule over the primitive tribes of the East. He takes the moon dragon as his mate, and together they have 9 dragon children. Minus 5600. The Great Cataclysm. For reasons unknown, the polar gates collapse. In a moment, the Old Ones are ripped from the world. Perished or banished, they will never return. Through the broken gates pours a torrent of magic so great that the geomantic web shatters. As the magical machinery of the Old Ones crumbles, pure chaos is unleashed into reality, where it coalesces into warpstone, great chunks of which rain from the skies even as the chaos moon, Morsleb, forms in the heavens above. Where these land, the world becomes warped and mutated. As the first and greatest storm of magic ravages the young world, demonic legions manifest, heralding the arrival of their dark masters. Many of the oldest and most powerful Slann are overwhelmed by the storm of magic and struck down. Minus 5589. The remaining Slann and their lizardmen armies desperately rally to face the threat. Demonic incursions throughout the geomantic web cause reality to twist and tear to accommodate the encroaching realm of chaos. The temple cities of the Slann are besieged by hosts of shrieking daemons. Despite their best efforts, many cities in Lustria and the Southlands are overrun, yet more Slann and inconceivable numbers of lizardmen are slain by the servants of chaos, but their armies stand resolute, defending the works of their lost masters. Minus 5,000 to minus 4,500. In the company of their ancestor gods, the dwarfs begin their slow colonization of the world's edge mountains, pressing north as far as the borders of the realm of chaos, south as far as the coast of the Sour Sea, and west along the Pale Sisters. As their realm expands, they delve ever deeper for treasures and precious minerals to feed their forges and fuel their industries. Grimnir meets and befriends Kalidor Dragontamer. Minus 4,500. The War Against Chaos. In Ulthuan, Inarian is recognized as the leader of his people when he passes unscathed through the sacred flame that burns beneath the shrine of Asurion. In the World's Edge Mountains, as many a mountain fastness is besieged by hordes of demons, mutated beasts and primitive men, the ancestor god Grimnir takes up his axe and heads north, journeying through lands warped by chaos and beyond the shattered polar gate, into the realm of chaos itself. Minus 4499. Inarian allies with Kalidor Dragontamer, mightiest of all elven mages. Mounted upon the great dragon in Draugnir and wearing the crown of the Phoenix King, Inarian leads an army of elf dragon riders against the hosts of demons that besiege their lands, driving them into the seas. With the forces of chaos seemingly defeated, a fragile peace descends over Ulthuan, and Inarian marries Astariel, making her his ever-queen. Minus 4470. Inarian's peace is proven short lived when the forces of chaos attack Avalorn. The ever-queen is slain within her sacred groves, and her infant children, Ivrain and Morelian, are believed stolen away by the ruinous powers. Racked with rage and grief, Inarian makes haste to the Blighted Isle where he draws the Sword of Cain. Armed with this most terrible of weapons, the first Phoenix King becomes a grim avatar of bloody, Minas-handed death. Minus 4460. At his court in Nagarith, Anarion takes Marathi as his bride, and she soon bears him a son. Kalidor Dragantama concludes that to end the ceaseless incursions of the daemonic legions, the wild winds of magic that lash Ulthuan must be stilled. Work begins to repair and expand the ancient network of standing stones, which has stood upon Ulthuan since the dawn of time. -4450. In Lustria, the 4 centuries long siege of Itza is finally broken by the eldritch might of Lord Croak. To save its temple, minor city from demonic hordes, the oldest living Slan sacrifices its life, though death is to prove little hindrance to so powerful a creature, and its immortal spirit begins one last invocation to banish the demonic legions from the world and avert the doom of the remaining temple minor cities. -4420. On the Isle of the Dead, Kalidor Dragontamer unleashes a vortex that will siphon the raging winds of magic back into the realm of chaos, settling the storms of magic that have raged for centuries. Struck down in battle, Anarion is wounded almost unto death. His last act is to return the accursed Sword of Cain to the Blighted Isle. In the east, the celestial dragon and his 9 children drive the daemonic hosts from their lands. In Lustria, the shade of Lord Croak completes an invocation begun decades ago. Far to the north, beyond the borders of reality, the wrath of Grimnir is unleashed. -4419, the Age of Recovery. With Anarion lost, a new Phoenix King is chosen. Malarion, Anarion's youthful son, is passed over, and the honor is given to Bel-Shanar. The coronation marks the end of the war against chaos and the start of the great period of rebuilding and discovery. -4300, the dwarfs of the world's edge mountains venture east, journeying across barren uplands which they name Zorn Uzkul, the Great Skull Land. West of the mountains of Morn, they settle upon the mineral-rich plain of Jar, -4164. Elves make landfall upon the western coast of the Old World, quickly establishing settlements around promising harbours. -4199. Elven settlers and dwarf prospectors meet and renew the friendship formed between Grimnir and Kalidor Dragontamer. Trade between the races is brisk, and an alliance is formed to drive the remnants of chaos back into the primordial forests. As elven colonies prosper, wealth begins to flow back to Ulthuan, and the dwarfs begin to found many new strongholds. -4000 to -3500. As the dwarfs of Zorn Uzkul delve far beneath the surface, contact with the dwarfs of the world's edge mountains becomes infrequent. The western dwarfs believe the easterners to have perished in distant lands. The eastern dwarfs, believing themselves forsaken by their peers and their gods alike, gradually turn to the worship of Hashut, Father of Darkness. -3000, as the power of Cathay grows in the east, the celestial dragon takes the mantle of emperor and names his lands the Empire of Grand Cathay, seeking the protection of the dragon from the horrors of the north or the monsters of the mountains of Morn. Thousands of human tribes settle in the growing nation. -2751. Bel-Shanar is assassinated at the shrine of Asurion, and, revealing his treachery, Malarion proclaims himself Phoenix King. The Wood-Minisby usurper steps into the sacred flames of Asurion to prove his worth, but is found wanting and emerges horrifically burned. Civil war erupts across Ulthuan, -2750. The Celestial Dragon Emperor uses his astromancers to crash a warpstone meteorite into the lands of the ogres, killing 2-3 of them and carving out the Great Maw. The impact and resultant dust storms also create the Warpstone Desert, forming a barrier with the west along the edge of the Mountains of Morn. -2723, the Sundering. At the height of the civil war upon Ulthuan, Malarion attempts to harness the power trapped within the Great Vortex and bring forth the realm of chaos once more. His catastrophic failure unleashes energies that devastate the land, causing much of Ulthuan to be engulfed by the ocean waves. Malarion and his treacherous armies flee to Nagaroth, -2700. The dwarfs of Zorn Uzkul, the Dawi Jar, raise the mighty ziggurat of Mingol Jarminus Nagrund in the plain of Jar, -2600. The Dawi Jar march into the dark lands and the mountains of Morn, conquering and enslaving many orc and goblin tribes to work their ever-growing network of mines beneath the dark lands and mountains of Morn. -2500. Settra unifies the disparate necropolis cities of Nehechara, making it the first and greatest true human empire, -2200. The armies of Ulthuan take the blighted isle from the forces of Malerion, but the victory celebrations are short-lived. The elven fleet is beset by storms as it returns home, and many ships are sunk. The flagship of the Phoenix King is wrecked upon the coast of Nagaroth and Kalidor. The conqueror is lost beneath the waves. -2198. With the coronation of Kalidor II, an uneasy peace settles over Ulthuan. The survivors of the civil war begin rebuilding their ruined lands, whilst Malerion, the dread Minas king, consolidates his power in Nagaroth. -2016. Karondkar is founded in Nagaroth. -2005. The Great Betrayal. Dwarf traders are ambushed and murdered, dwarf settlements are plundered, and honest dwarf craftsmen cheated of their gold. The dwarfs believe the elves are to blame. Their attackers are in fact raiders sent by Malerion to sow dissent between the two races. Many elves are slain by dwarf travellers believing themselves under attack. The elves retaliate in kind. Soon both sides begin to muster their armies. -2000 Nagash is born to King Ketep of Kemri, -1997. Hoping to avert war, the dwarf High King, Gotrek Starbreaker, sends an ambassador to Ulthuan. Dwarf demands are met with arrogance, and the ambassador is shaved of his beard and sent home. The resulting war, known variously as the War of the Beard and the War of Vengeance, will rage for several centuries. Elf colonies in the Old World bear the brunt of the hostilities, and many elven settlements built inland are sacked and razed, forcing their inhabitants back to their coastal strongholds. The port of Toralessi is besieged many times. Dwarfs chop down entire virgin forests to fuel their war effort and spite the elves. -1974 Snorri Halfhand, son of Gotrek Starbreaker, is slain by King Kalidor II after challenging the elf to single combat. -1968, an elven ship carrying mages from the court of the dread Minas king is driven off Minas course by storms and forced to dock in Kemri. Nagash studies their magic. Morgrim, cousin of Snorri Halfhand, kills the elf lord Imladric at the Battle of Uragor. -1959. Nagash slays the priest king of Kemri and seizes power. -1950 to -1750. Nagash distills an elixir from human blood that prolongs his fading youth, which he then shares with certain depraved nobles chosen to rule under him. Over the following centuries, these nobles come to see themselves as gods and the city's population as cattle. As their span of life extends beyond that of ordinary mortals, they shun the light and seek out cool, dark places to hide in from the burning day. Nagash orders the construction of the Black Pyramid, one of the largest structures ever built by man. -1800. In Cathay, work begins on the Great Bastion. This impenetrable fortress wall, a quarter of a mile high, will span league upon league along the border of Cathay, presenting an insurmountable barrier against the incursions of the Hobgoblin Khans and growing numbers of barbarous humans that make up the marauder tribes. -1750 to -1600. The many priest kings of Nehechara form a great confederation against Nagash. After more than a century of warfare, Nagash's power is broken, and he is forced to flee north. The nobles of Lamia secretly steal away Nagash's books and seek to emulate his dark magic. -1600. Nagash's wanderings take him to Cripple Peak. Here, Nagash discovers Warpstone and begins to experiment, using the raw stuff of chaos to fuel his already potent magics. -1560. Kalidor II is killed by Gotrek Starbreaker at the Battle of Three Towers, and the Phoenix Crown is lost. Victorious, the dwarfs return to the mountains and refuse to fight anymore. The War of Vengeance is over. -1501 Kalidor's heir, Caradriel, recalls Ulthuan's armies from the Old World, leaving the colonies unguarded. Caradriel tells the colonists that if they wish to enjoy the protection of Ulthuan, they should return there. Many reluctantly abandon the Old World, but others decide to stay. The coastal cities decline and, in time, are abandoned. -1500, the time of woes. Across the world, terrible earthquakes and volcanic eruptions strike. In Cathay, sections of the Great Bastion collapse and hordes of marauding tribes raid deep into the nation. In the World's Edge Mountains, the Dwarf Empire faces disaster. Communication between many holds is lost, and anarchy reigns. In the chaos, Karak Ungor falls to a goblin invasion, the foul creatures bursting into the hold through great rents caused by the seismic activity. Beneath Cripple Peak, Nagash uses his legions of undead to mine ever more warpstone from the trembling earth. Many of the elf colonists remaining in the old world venture into Athel Loren in search of shelter as their settlements fall to ruin. -199. Karak Varn on the banks of the Black Water, flooded barely a year before when earthquakes split the rock from which it was carved, is overrun by Skaven, loathsome ratmen that tunnel from beneath the earth. It is the second dwarf hold to fall, but many more will follow in the years ahead. -1498 Orc Warlord Argor. Foespike ousts the dwarfs of the Dragonback Mountains and establishes the orc lair known as Mount Bloodhorn. -1457. The gold mines at Gunbad, the largest and richest mines in the World's Edge Mountains, fall to the Night Goblins after many years of sporadic fighting. -1387 to -1367. The Silver Road Wars are fought between dwarfs and goblins. At their height, only 1 in 5 dwarfen caravans survives the journey through the goblin-infested Deadrock Gap. -1362. After many years and many hard-fought battles, the dwarfs abandon the last of their mines and smaller settlements in the eastern reaches of the World's Edge Mountains. -1350. Cripple Peak is attacked and besieged from beneath by Skaven hungry for warpstone, but Nagash has grown powerful in his exile, and the attack falters, becoming a bitter siege. Eventually a settlement is reached between Nagash and his enemies, and many valuable resources captured by the Skaven are traded with the Necromancer, in return for warpstone mined below Cripple Peak. -1250. Thunder Mountain erupts, driving orcs, goblins and trolls northwards, towards Karasminusaminus Karak. A period of bitter fighting known as the Troll Wars follows. -1245, King Morgrim Blackbeard leads his forces southwards to reclaim the mountains around Mad Dog Pass. Another dwarf army heads east and briefly recaptures Mount Gunbad. Many other fallen dwarf holds are attacked and besieged by the vengeful dwarfs. Over the next 300 years, the dwarfs continue to re-establish their hold over and under the mountains. The underway is partially cleared in places, and some minor holds are retaken. The tombs of many ancestors are refurbished. The time of woes has ended. -1200. The nobles of Lamia become corrupted by their study of Nagash's works, devolving into foul revenants that feed hungrily upon the blood of the living. Rumors of this reach the other great cities of Nehechara. Lahmia is invaded, and the followers of Nagash are defeated by a coalition of priest kings led by Alcadizar the Conqueror. -1185. Cadrin Redmane, the dwarf runesmith, leads an expedition into the ruins of Karak Varn, where he discovers a rich vein of Gromril and petitions the High King to allow him to resettle the old stronghold. Miners flock to Karak Varn, and Gromril begins to flood into the High King's coffers. -63. Nagash brings war to Nehekara, but is defeated by the formidable might of Alcadizar. In his rage, Nagash unleashes terrible plagues and curses upon the land, striking down millions but leaving Alcadizar healthy and unharmed. Alone in a land of the dead and the dying, Nagash's legions march into Nehechara, all but unopposed, and Alcadizar is brought in chains to Cripple Peak. -1151, the Great Ritual. Nagash undertakes a great ritual that will awaken the land of Nehechara into undeath. Nagash's treacherous allies free King Alcadizar, who, wielding a weapon of terrible power crafted by the Skaven, cuts down Nagash and flees with the great necromancer's crown, a potent artifact imbued with a portion of its owner's essence. So great is the power unleashed by the great ritual that the awakened legions of the Tomb Kings remain animated. -1147. The body of Alcadizar, and with it Nagash's crown, is discovered by Kadon. Possessed by the shade of Nagash, the shaman founds the city of Morkine. -1136. Cadrin Redmane is ambushed and killed. His last act is to throw his rune hammer far out into the black water to prevent it falling into the hands of the enemy. Following Cadrin's death, the dwarf's hold on Karak Varn becomes increasingly tenuous. Minus Ulmvent 25, the Winter of Woe. In Athul Loren, Ariel and Orion become king and queen in the woods. Minus 1095, the Battle of Loren. Morga, the Lord of Skulls, and his beastmen herd attack Athul Loren. Minus 1000. The lands surrounding Athul Loren are settled by people of the warlike Bretonny tribe. They learn of the elves in the forest, and fear venturing too far into the forest itself. Minus 813, the Battle of Anguish. In Athul Loren, Morga the Corrupter is slain following a great battle in what forever after will be known as the Glade of Woe. Minus 700, elven seafarers report human shepherds grazing their flocks amid the tumbled ruins of former elf cities. Minus 6666, Wars of the Green Moon. Morslieb hangs large in the northern sky for more than a month. Mortal and demonic servants of chaos battle ferociously within the Chaos Wastes for control of the magic storms. Minus 503, the fall of Karak 8 Peaks. For more than a century, the greatest dwarf hold resists invasion, but its doom descends suddenly when its wells are poisoned and its tunnels filled with deadly gases. King Lun orders the tombs of the kings of old Birunaminasilid, and the hold is abandoned. The king vows his home will be reclaimed one day. Minus 469, orcs destroy the dwarf hold of Karakazgal but abandon it when they find no treasure. The orcs then capture a Karakdraz, renaming it the Black Crag. Now all the mountains between Mad Dog Pass and Karak 8 Peaks are in orc and goblin hands. Minus 370, orc warboss Ugrok Beardburner leads a war to the dwarf capital of Karazaminus Karak. The dwarf High King Logan Proudbeard is captured and humiliated, but the orcs are driven back and defeated at the Battle of Blackwater. The newly invented dwarf cannon plays a large part in the orc defeat and the messy beheading of warboss Ugrok. Minus 250. The dwarfs intensify their trading with the growing tribes of men that dwell west of the World's Edge Mountains, in the lands that are to become the Empire. Several expeditions are launched into the Forest of Loren, never to be seen again. Minus 200. The cult of Qian Qi, as Tsinch is known in the East, becomes popular amongst the aristocracy of the city of Beichai in Cathay. Morkain is sacked by Wa Kraktooth. Minus 150. The first Black Orcs are seen fighting in the vanguard of the armies of the Dawi Jar. Within 50 years they revolt and war breaks out within Jaraminus Nagrund. Many Black Orcs escape to the World's Edge Mountains and Mountains of Morn. Minus 50. Artur, king of the Teutigans, discovers the Fauschlag Rock, later known as Ulrichsburg, and enlists the aid of the dwarfs to build a fortress that will be known as Middenheim. Minus 40. Nagash is reborn. He assumes the Tomb Kings will obey his orders, but they do not, and he is forced to retreat to Cripple Peak. Nagash finds his fortress overrun by his enemies and drives them all out in a single night. Minus 30. Sigmar is born to the chief of the Unberogan tribe. Minus 15. King Kurgan Ironbeard of Karasminusaminus. Karak is rescued from orcs by Sigmar, prince of the Unberogan tribe. From this meeting, a great alliance between the races of dwarfs and men is forged. In gratitude for his rescue, the dwarf king gifts to Sigmar the rune hammer Galmaraz, or Skull Splitter, an ancient heirloom of the king's clan. Minus 8. Upon the death of his father, Sigmar becomes chief of the Unberogan tribe. Minus 1, at the Battle of Blackfire Pass, a massive orc army is annihilated by the armies of Sigmar and Kurgan Ironbeard. The orc and goblin hordes are driven from the lands. Year 0. A twin minus-tailed comet appears in the heavens. 1. Sigmar is crowned emperor by the high priest of Ulrich. Many dwarfs settle within the empire, where they help the humans build their first cities. Dwarf masons, carpenters and smiths are much in demand, and dwarf workmanship is admired everywhere. 1 to 15. In search of his lost crown, Nagash travels north, where he raises a huge undead army and attacks the fledgling empire. At the Battle of the River Reich, Nagash is felled by Sigmar and his army almost completely destroyed. 50. After a half-century of prosperity, Sigmar relinquishes his throne and vanishes into the east. The system of elector counts is established whereby the provincial leaders elect one of their number to be emperor. 73. The spreading cult of Sigmar receives its first grand theogonist, Johann Hellsturm. Sigmar becomes the patron god of the empire he founded. 501. Marienburg is absorbed by the empire during the reign of Emperor Sigismund II. 577. The Bretonnie tribes face a great incursion of orcs and goblins that descends from the Grey and Appuccini mountains. Orc warlords demand tribute from the Bretonnie tribes, but are rejected. For the next 400 years, the Bretonnie fight the orc hordes. 698. Representatives of the Phoenix King arrive in Cathay. They return laden with silk, jade, and spices. Trade between East and West begins to flourish. 977. Gilles le Breton begins to unite the Bretonians into a single nation. He fights 12 battles and is victorious in every one, conquering all the lands west of the Grey Mountains and creating the land of Bretonia. 1017. Norse raiders establish a stronghold on the island of Sartosa. 1111. Unleashed by the Skaven, the Black Plague sweeps through the Old World, and many settlements are abandoned due to falling populations. In Sylvania, the necromancer Frederick van Hal raises a huge undead army from the bodies of the plague's victims, and a long war begins against armies of Skaven invaders. 1115. The death of Emperor Boris Goldgather from the Black Plague. His reign is memorable only for the high levels of corruption and taxation it brought. 1124. Van Hal is assassinated and his undead horde wiped out. The Skaven, weakened by war, are defeated and driven back underground by Count Mandred Skavenslayer. Count Mandred is elected emperor. 1142. King Guillaume defeats the orcs at the Battle of Amandur and drives them from Bretonia once more. 1152. Emperor Mandred Skavenslayer is assassinated. The elector counts cannot agree upon a successor, and the empire divides into self-governing provinces. 775. Cetra leads a large raiding force against Bretonia. He is met at Savage Point by a Bretonian fleet led by Admiral Henry Lamort. Cetra's fleet is heavily defeated, but he escapes, vowing revenge. 1360. Grand Duchess Ottilia of Talabecland declares herself empress, and war erupts between Talabecland and Stirland. 1494. Khan Minus Queen, Miska, daughter of Radi Bokha, leads the Gospodars through the High Pass, driving back the Ungol tribes. 1524. Under Khan Minus Queen. Shoika, work begins on building the great Gospodar capital, Kislev. Shoika, daughter of Miska, takes the title of Tsarina. 1547. The Count of Middenheim proclaims himself emperor. There are now 3 emperors, none of which commands much loyalty amongst the other provinces. In time, hostilities wane between factions and each emperor effectively rules an independent state. 1681. The Night of the Restless Dead. Nagash returns to life once again, 1666 years after he was slain by Sigmar. For one night throughout the known world, the dead stir and walk the land, sowing terror and confusion amongst the living. Many vampires come out of hiding and wage war to increase their domains. Countless villages and towns are overrun and destroyed before the night of terror ends. 1707 War. Ironclaw erupts into the empire through Blackfire Pass. Much of the southern corner of the empire is sacked and burned. Count Eldred of Solland is slain and the Runefang of Solland taken. At the Battle of Grunberg, the Orc warboss is badly wounded, and his War loses impetus. The Orc army breaks up, leaving the eastern half of the empire in ruins. 1757. Sartosa becomes the lair of pirates. 1797. In Sylvania, the vampire Vlad von Carstein marries Countess Isabella von Drac. Over the following 2 centuries, the remaining aristocratic families of the province are infected with the curse of vampirism. 1850. Far beneath the surface of the world, the Skaven Underminus Empire erupts into a vicious and protracted civil war. For several centuries, the loathsome Ratmen seem to vanish into myth leading many scholars to doubt their existence at all. 1979. Margrethe of Marienburg is elected emperor by those elector counts not claiming the crown for themselves. The Grand Theogonist of Sigmar refuses to acknowledge the appointment, and the imperial system is effectively ended. 2001. The Phoenix King, Finubar the Seafarer, lands at the Bretonnian port of Langille. He travels extensively across the Old World, opening relations with the Empire, Bretonnia, and even the dwarfs. 2010. The Wars of the Vampire Counts begin with the devastation of Ostermark by the armies of Vlad von Carstein. For more than a century, the armies of Vlad and his descendants torment the Fracture,